My pleasure to introduce Dr. Carey Bazalgette, who is an honorary research fellow of University College London in the Institute of Education. She has had a long experience in the past as the head of education at the British Film Institute. Her current focus of interest is how children begin to learn about moving image media before they are 3 years old. She will talk about children and television and the controversial topic of how soon and how much should small children be allowed to watch TV. Dr. Bazalgette, we look forward to your talk. Thank you.
I just need to check if my microphone is on, but I turned it off to go to the loo. That would be a good idea. Anyway, good morning. Thank you for coming. I'd like to start just by saying a bit more about my background. And that goes. Can you read that at the back? Because you may want to move a bit further forward because there'll be other slides. I hate reading slides. I don't know whether you find it irritating, but I do. I'll assume nobody said anything, okay? You may have got the impression that it was just the sort of discrepancy between the two lots of findings about children and television that just made me go and investigate that for a bit. But actually, the background to this goes back, I think, well, to the 1960s. So I was a teacher in London schools, and like quite a few other people, I was starting to include study of film and film viewing in English lessons as part of looking at narrative. And then my children were born, so I nearly forgot that. That made me fascinated by some of the ways that they were behaving with TV. And it was because of that I thought, oh, I'm going to do a PhD on this. I'm going to go to the Institute of Education and start the preliminary studying I need to do. But then I got interrupted by the BFI, who invited me to come and be an education officer. I couldn't resist that. I spent 27 years there. Part of that time, my husband was invited to do the junior screenings at the National Film Theatre, and I used to take our children there and also listen to the other kids who were watching. And particularly because he showed films that weren't actually necessarily made for children, and quite a lot of foreign material as well. He was the first person to bring Iranian films into this country, first person to bring Studio Ghibli films into this country, and it was fascinating just listening to children. Some of them had to be whispered to for the subtitle. But that kind of was stoking up my interest as well. So after I left the BFI, I was thinking, I thought, gee, I should do this PhD sometime. And then I had this interesting experience, or so did my children. My grandchildren by then, I had 2 grandchildren, twin grandchildren. And they were utterly terrified by an episode of In the Night Garden, which, you know, you're not supposed to be, really. What I realised thinking about that was they were terrified because they hadn't spotted the signals that it was supposed to be funny. So I thought, okay, learning about genre is quite an important early thing. You know, you need to know that. You need to have some expectations of what it is you're watching. So that was really what triggered me properly starting on the PhD. And didn't want to say any more about that. Yeah, I was ploughing obviously through loads and loads of articles and books, and almost all of them were American, and they were all full of dire warnings about the terrible effects of TV. You know, I'm sure you're sort of familiar with this kind of thing, that maybe if you've had, wait a minute, which button do I have to press? That one. If you've had arguments with your children or grandchildren about TV watching, this might be the thing that lies behind it. And I've underlined some of the language there, because it's really super confident, isn't it? This is the result of an AI search from Google. I didn't write this, by the way. And I like the way, well, I don't like the way, I hate the way it's got these sort of rather bullying kind of quasi-scientific terms in it, like sedentary screen time, and optimal development, and social cues, overstimulation, and brain development. Wow, you know, it's really... And then there's this assumption, passively watching. Children watch TV passively. That's just an assumption. Is it true? Well, we'll find out. Anyway, I've never seen any. And basically I'm saying that babies don't watch TV passively because they don't have time. And you'll understand why a little bit later. So the advice has been around for a long time. So do parents watch it? Parents follow it? No, they don't. So quite recently, studies found that 75% of 2-year-olds were established TV watchers before they're 2. The percentage of children, I didn't know that you could get this from government statistics. You can get annual, I don't know how they do it even, but anyway, you get annual data on children's levels of progression. And 80% of them are doing actually better than they did the year before. So there's some discrepancy here, isn't there? So that was the kind of thing I was picking up in my research. But the other thing I picked up was how terrible a lot of it is. It's absolutely extraordinary. They don't ask about family circumstances. So they don't ask about household income or the stresses people are under. It's all dependent on parental self-reporting, which is obviously going to be unreliable. And I also had particular objections. Hello? On fire? No. Particular objections because the researchers, most of the researchers really don't know much about film or moving image or how it works. They make very simple, jumping to conclusions. And very few of them, practically none of them, did observational studies. And of course, when you do, as I did observational studies of my own grandchildren, there were people in the institute going, no, you can't study your own grandchildren. Well, Piaget did, and Darwin did, so I reckon I could. And it is surprising, actually, how long it took for researchers to point out what was the problem with the research. The screen time rules were published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, let's put them on the screen, in 1999. But that paper by Duck and others that exposes those methodological errors didn't appear till 14 years later. And I was already doing my research, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by the standard of the research. It was the last year, Peter Etchells did a book about what's wrong with the screen time notion. And that had quite a lot of publicity. There was quite a lot of coverage in The Guardian, at least. But actually, by 2016, the AAP was beginning to modify its rules, and they did actually admit that they had been depending on research that really wasn't very good, and that they felt that screen time was not actually a very good measure of very kind of thing. So you're allowed to forget about that now. But they do what they do is prioritise good parenting. So it's good that they're doing that, I think. But I start from a different position. I see moving image media as not being simple and obvious, that you can just start watching from scratch and just drink it all in. It's a form of communication, and we've all had to learn to understand it. And we don't remember doing that because we did it too young. Actually, I didn't do it very young because there wasn't any TV during the war. But basically, these media are more complex than they're given credit for. There's a sort of basic belief that they're really lifelike cultural forms, that people immediately understand them. And though probably when the first movies came out in the 1890s, probably people did pretty much instantly understand them because of just single shots. But I think the idea that film is lifelike and it's just, it's just like every other experience in life, rather got sort of pushed by the promotion around early films, because there were all these stories that went around about, oh, the audiences were screaming and running out when a train came towards them. Don't believe it, don't think it happened. And they were just completely taken in by it. And there were actually some critical writing about it. If you ever get time to look up Gorky, maybe you know it already, Gorky's account of urban cinema, that's quite interesting. He said it's really miserable and they're all grey. So let's get on with it, because what I'd like to do is to show you a slide. That's the, I don't know how well you can see that from the back. The colour's quite light, that's quite good. Just trying to see what it is you can look so different on there. Anyway, this is a 4-month-old baby called Sulu. And when I took this picture, her dad, he was supposed to be looking after, because Mum was doing, I can't remember what Mum was doing, but she was doing something else. And but he also had to get his dinner and eat it and get out because he had something to go to. So then Sulu was being a bit annoyed, so he put her on his lap and he's put an episode, Cocomelon, yes? Episode of Cocomelon on there for her to watch, because she knows she liked that. And what I'd like to do, if you can, is let's have a look. Can you get that closer look at Sulu? Can anybody want to comment on what she's doing? Is she being passive? Could you call out? She's engaged. Yeah, what tells you that? Yes, her hand. Hands are a really crucial thing. I learned in the course of my research. So it looks like her right hand's gripping that blanket, and her left hand, her fingers are pinched. I found that was a typical thing. They're pinching the fingers together, and her mouth's open. But you can just see that one eye, and it's really looking. And when you think about it, if you're 4 months old and you're lying on your bed and you have to raise your head's enormous at that age. It's quite an effort. So I think it's just fascinating. Every time I watch babies or toddlers watching TV, I'm just so fascinated by the amount of effort and commitment they put into it. So, I don't call that being hypnotised. I don't call it passive. I call it learning. And I think that's what babies do very early in life, we know that, because they have to. So to give that a bit of context, I want to just slip back about 500,000 years, if that's okay. I'm really glad I didn't know that childbirth was worse for humans than for any other mammal when I had mine. But I'm fascinated by it now. And there's a theory about why this is. It's known as the obstetric dilemma, and it's still debated. Some people don't agree with this, but it seems pretty convincing to me. So the theory goes like this. When pre-humans started to become bipedal, so they were walking and running on 2 legs, the theory is that bipedalism wasn't very efficient at first. And if you've seen a chimpanzee run on 2 legs, you'll know what I mean. Because of the wide hips that those pre-humans had. So gradually, in about 500,000 years or so, pelvises gradually became narrower. So, we do have, everybody agrees, we do have quite narrow pelvises, even as women have narrower pelvises than gorillas, which is just as well, really. But the other thing that went on, of course, while that was happening, was that we were becoming much more dexterous. We got opposing thumbs. We could manipulate things. We started to make the thing pre-human, started to make tools and weapons and so on. And so while that was going on, our brains got bigger. You can see where this is going, can't you? It is quite widely accepted that humans are an ultra-shield species, which means our babies have to be born when they're still small enough to get out. In other words, they're premature. So we all know how helpless babies are. And they can't hang on to our hair while we swing through the trees, They can't get up and run with the herd like baby deer. They just lie there, And what they first have to do, I skipped a bit, what they have got are big brains. And they have a huge amount of development to do by the time they're 3. In those early environments, you can imagine how urgent it is to be able to walk, to be able to see things, to be able to spot what other people are doing. be able to alert to danger. If you can't do that by the time you're 3, you won't survive. So that, I think, lies behind the terrible 2 business. I'll come to that a little bit later. What human babies have to do, they have to, as well as all those practical things, they have to learn the culture they've been born into. Not only language, but how we relate to each other, how we understand each other's behaviour, how we understand the stories that we're told or that we later we read, and for many of us, how we understand the stories we watch. And I do think this is why 2-year-olds, this intense drive to explain, is why 2-year-olds can get into such a rage when they're stopped from doing something or refusing to do something they're told to do. They're about as cross as you or I would be if we were reading a book and somebody snatched it away. But what? You know, how dare you? And something I discovered in the course of my research, it's quite interesting in this, is I've asked people from 15 other people's native languages, 15 other people speaking a different native language, if terrible twos exists in their language, and it doesn't. It seems to be a purely British thing. And I have written a bit of the book why I think that is. It might be related to colonialism, but I'm not going to do that now. So you may be sceptical about the idea that we have to learn to understand TV, because we're so sold on the idea that they're lifelike and they're easy to understand. We've forgotten those early days when we had to puzzle out their meaning. Now, I think this is a nice question, and I hope you can read this. I'll read it to you. This is an American academic, quite a long time ago actually. It seems remarkable that no one has undertaken to discover what special problems of narrative comprehension may be posed to a child by film narratives. For example, when and how do children understand an eye line match, screen direction, cross-cutting, an unusual angle, off-screen space, non-diegetic sound? In case you don't know that, what those terms are, but most of you do, but I will. Why have I turned over 2 pages here? Hang on a minute. Okay, sorry. So those are the sort of puzzles. I've picked up a few of what Brannigan says. So eyeline matches that's it's an experiment, but anyway, when somebody looks elsewhere, you tend to follow their gaze. You expect to see what they're seeing. Obviously, back then in the forest, you would have needed that. You still do, really. Somebody sees a car about to hit you. Then a cut to close-up. I was working with a group of nursery school teachers talking about film, and one of them said, what if a 2-year-old sees a picture of a ladybird on a leaf, sort of like that, and then you get a close-up of the ladybird. So does she think that's the same ladybird but bigger, or does she think it's another much bigger ladybird? So we argued about that for about 40 minutes, because we don't know. We don't know what she thinks. It's really hard to find out. But that's the kind of thing. Is that immediately obvious? We're not sure. And then the cut, it's a cut to close up, and eyeline match was the point of view shot, yeah. And cross-cutting, that's the thing. Everybody thinks it's called Perils of Pauline, actually it's called Hazards of Helen. A film in like 1917, where the heroine is tied to the railway line and somebody's coming along on a horse to stop the train, apparently. So you cross-cut between the two. You see her screaming, and then you see him running. Will he get there in time? It's a way of building suspense. And then the other one I added myself, because on-screen presenters, I discovered that, I actually first discovered this when I was teaching six-year-olds in Islington, and talking about television audience. We're talking about advertisements, and how lots of people watch them, and they couldn't really get their heads around the fact there's lots of people watching the same thing that I'm watching, but they're somewhere else. Didn't really get that. And there was an interesting conversation between my daughter and one of my grandchildren when she was being sort of playful. They're watching Milkshakers. She said, "What about if we jump through the screen? Wouldn't that be interesting?" He said, "Yeah, we could see her children." She said, "What do you mean, her children?" He said, no, she has children. They're called milkshakers. So when she was saying, well, look, it's lovely to see you today, and so on and so forth, he didn't realise that she wasn't talking to actual children, she was talking to him, and it was in the plural because there's lots and lots and lots of people watching the same thing. He hadn't really gotten onto that at all, and probably wouldn't for several years unless he'd been told about it then. So I hope that illustrates for you that there are things that novice viewers have to learn when they first start watching and you don't remember them. You might possibly remember not being able to understand something on a screen when you were little. I certainly do. And we can't really get to understand when babies get to, really be able to read those things. But I did find out, I've told you about the milkshakers thing. So there are probably quite a few parents who feel a bit guilty about their child watching TV because they've been told that TV is bad for them. And they've done an online search and they found all those terrible effects. And as a result, they get terribly worried. I've picked up all these from social media. So they get scared of something that seems innocuous, as my children do. They want to watch the same thing again and again. Why do they do that? They need to do it because they're learning it. They have to watch things again and again. They want to get close to the screen and touch it. They think it's real. They don't. They want to touch the screen. Have you ever touched the screen? It's fantastic. It's really amazing when it's very, very close up. And it's slightly soft, so you can sort of dent it. I think it's good fun. They pick up the passive viewing thing because the child is sitting there very, very tense. They're not picking up those because they're quite little clues. You pick them up because I asked you to, but you notice the hands, you notice the eyes, you notice the posture. They don't look at that, they think, oh, well, it's passive viewing, we all know that, but we don't. And when children throw a tantrum when they stop viewing, and if they're English, they're called terrible twos. And it's not surprising, if you were told, go out in the middle of a concert you paid to see, you'd be furious as well. So that sort of guilt, I think, is really, it's uncalled for, really. I haven't done that one. So, I think I said this, it was my twin grandchildren that I studied for the PhD. And it was, in fact, the first time when I got really sort of fixed on this idea of extreme close attention was when there's a Connie and Alfie. So Connie, she was about 20 months. And I put on this program called, Mr. Thing's Nursery. Anyway, it's all about gardening and it's full of animated vegetables and children singing, and it's quite full on. But anyway, she was sitting on the sofa and this came on, and she slid off the sofa and she walked towards the screen. The screen was close to a table and she sat there. She put her hand on the table and she sat there, stood there on for 7 minutes. That's quite hard. She was absolutely riveted at this. And my husband said, well, do you want to dance to the music? And she gave him a look. No, she wanted to look. She wouldn't, her brother wasn't doing that, but she was. And I've been expecting to do my observational work, seeing a lot of activity around the screen, the responses and so on. No, a great deal of it was kids being absolutely still like this. And here they're 28 months. And this is just to give you an example of the way that they would behave with something that was new. This is a particularly lovely film. You might be able to find it online. It's on Vimeo, I think. They were sitting further back in the room and I said, why don't we see this film, put it on. And it starts with a swanny whistle sound and a little drawn mouse appears on the page with live fingers operating the pencil. It's lovely. And then the whole story is the cat chasing the mouse, so you don't have to worry about the narrative, you know what happens there. It doesn't catch the mouse. And it's about 5.5 minutes long. And the film is about, it was made for a film festival, it wasn't made for children. It illustrates the 5 different kinds of animation technique, which I must have listed somewhere. Hang on a sec. No, I didn't. I wasn't going to bore you with that. But anyway, things like drawn animation, cell animation, sand animation, computer animation, model animation. The characters change as it goes through the film. They keep changing into different kinds of figures because they're drawn or presented differently. And so those, I put this film on, and they were somewhere else in the room, and they walked up, and you can see they're gripping the trolley, and they both got their mouths open. They were toddlers, so they were doing that quite a lot. They wanted to be close to the screen. It's that interesting. They want to be really near. And then it's quite difficult to see a toddler's frown. I found this, analysing the video, surprising how tricky a lot of it was. But, because it's hard to see a toddler's expressions if they frown. That's why I was using video and really studying the videos. Oh yes, he's actually frowning. Ah, right. And another thing, of course, was the repeat viewing. And they watched that film 21 times. They wanted to go back to it and back to it and back to it. And this is going back to the things I already knew from teaching context, which is that children are absolutely fascinated to see something that's stylistically different. They see so much on TV that's got sort of big eyes, great big head, all very fine, it's all full on. They see something different from that, they're amazed. And this reminds me of when I was at BFI, we published collections of short films for use in primary schools. I was very keen on developing work about film teaching in primary schools. We used to show these, we had training sessions as well. We'd show the films to the teachers and say, you think you might want to use this? And they go, I'm not sure our kids would like that. It's a bit different, isn't it? It's a bit straight. We said, well, try it and see. So then off they go, and then they come back to the next session and we said, so how did it go? And they said, it was absolutely amazing. They just wanted to watch it again and again. They wrote so much, they talked so much, they talked to each other, they came alive. And I thought, yes, that's interesting actually. They had been asked to, they were rewarded for all that learning they'd done, in a sense. They knew stuff about film and they hadn't been given enough diversity and enough interesting challenges to continue that learning in a way. That's why I'm writing a new book at the moment that's coming out in the autumn. And I'll let you know what the title is when I think of them. But that experience with teachers really made me think that, my main objection really to a lot of there's a lot of wonderful stuff that's made for 0 to 3s, but I think this is too samey. It's not on the screen anymore, but anybody watch Cocomelon? Nobody's going to confess. Oh, good. Brave person. I actually think that's interesting I found about Cocomelon. I mean, there are some horrendous things about it as well. It's technically quite complex. There's quite a lot of people say, oh, the shots are changed every 3 seconds. Well, it's not. That's quite long in some of the contexts. Shot changes, they do point of view shots, they do, it's quite complex. If you can bear to watch it, you could recognise that for yourself. But they all look the same, and there's an awful lot of TV that's just kind of, it's sort of front on. You don't get to go into the environment of the film. So there's an enormous amount of stuff available for babies and toddlers on TV, on the 0 to 3 age range. And we're really lucky that we have public service television, and I think that's partly why a lot of the, finger-wagging research comes from the United States, where they don't have public service, or not so much public service for children. But nevertheless, this TV is bad for children. It dominates public debates. It may be dominating your life at the moment as well. And that screen time notion is still something that a lot of parents worry about. A lot of parents don't, actually. But what we need for this age group is TV that's innovative and diverse stylistically, that's what I mean. And somebody might somebody said, well, what about Bluey? I think Bluey is great, but I don't think you can understand it very well if you're under 3, if you're not really experienced, because it's very fast and there's a lot of dialogue. Lots of talk about Bluey online. So I want to conclude with this quotation from the lovely Colwyn Trevaren, and maybe you can't, I must read this to you. Watching and listening to infants and toddlers, I've come to the view that being part of a culture is a need humans are born with. Culture, whatever its function, is a natural function. Whatever its content is a natural function. Children have an innate need to live and learn in culture, as fish swim in the sea and birds fly in the air. He died last year, unfortunately, but I think that's a wonderful statement about, what 0 to 3s really need. And that's where I'll finish.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm sure we have people here who want to ask a few questions. Who's got the microphone? Alison. Anybody want to pursue this? Okay, over here, please.
I'm just curious as to how that translates into watching videos and things on phones, which is...
Sorry, I couldn't hear that very clearly.
Sorry, how does that translate into watching videos on phones and things like smartphones?
I don't look at that so much. It does happen with babies in supermarkets.
Yeah.
And it happened as you saw in the picture with Pokemon as well. It's part of the larger question are you always reporting to what's on a phone or what's on film, and how critically do you watch it yourself? You might want to show them something on a phone that was absolutely wonderful, and they might want to watch it again and again, and that would be good, but probably a lot of the time it says, oh, here you are, watch this. I mean, I saw parents in a restaurant who gave their child Peppa Pig, and they couldn't understand, she wasn't interested in it. Of course she wasn't interested in it, she couldn't hear the dialogue. It was in a restaurant. So, it would be nice if people did it thoughtfully, if they could, possibly. But I'm not going to say anything to any of you, but this is what you or your children or your grandchildren should be doing. That's your choice. I just want to add in, and this is what my book, I hope, will add in to both to early years practitioners and to parents. Here's a dimension of TV watching that you may not have thought about, and it may make a difference to the way that you decide what you do.
Okay. Could we have a question from this lady here in the 3rd row?
Thank you very much for your amazing talk. There is a lot of anxiety about young children spending a lot of time on screens.
Yes.
And my question is it perhaps not so much a problem with screen watching as the fact that sometimes it's a reduction in time that parents spend one-to-one doing the most boring thing in the world, which is reading stories from a book, very dull, same book every night, 10 nights, and that parents are now opting out of that because they have the option of sitting them in front of a screen for half an hour before bedtime.
Probably the same thing applies really to reading stories, doesn't it? A child is likely to want to hear that story over and over again because they're not learning it, they're learning how to listen to it, learning more things about it. And I mean, you're quite right. I'm not going into that. I'm just saying, this is the important thing about that, and it can be as big or small a part of your life as you like. But do recognise what it is that we're talking about here. Don't just talk of it as a dread, mind-poisoning thing. It is interesting, I think, as I said earlier, the AAP are now saying, the important thing is good parenting. But you still have, what do you do if you're a single parent and you're living in a 12th floor flat and you haven't got much money and you're really stressed? You're going to recourse to the TV quite a lot. or your phone if you haven't got TV, or a tablet.
I'd like
It's
to
going to
ask a
happen.
question.
Yeah.
What is your actual advice to parents of 1 to 3-year-olds or 0 to 3-year-olds about how often and where? And yes, I mean, what is your actual advice?
I don't have any.
You don't have
I'm not
any?
interested in giving advice. I'm interested in sharing knowledge. I'm interested in saying this is what's probably going on, and it might make a difference to what the amount of time you spend or how you do it. It's up to you. I have a lot of respect for parents. I think most parents are brilliant. And if they're leaving their kid to watch TV for an awful lot of time, there's probably another reason that's quite tough. And if it's not going to help me coming on saying, you shouldn't be doing
I mean,
that.
the tough thing is that a lot of TV is on to amuse the parents, and they're not entirely suitable for the children to be watching.
Yeah, these things happen. I'm not doing this in order to tell people what to do. There's enough of that. There's no problem. Look online. You want to be told what to do, you will be.
So you're saying it's a very valuable part of learning our culture. That's your main point.
It's important that you have that opportunity. It's not going to be the end of the world if you don't. I didn't. Here I am.
Okay, we have a questioner over there now. Thank you.
Hi.
I have to say I watch an awful lot of TV, and one of the reasons I watch it is because I find it's kind of a wonderful way of learning how people interact in different cultures, and I'm constantly surprised by it. I mean, would you say that for children who, for whatever reason, are living in a sort of a sensorily, culturally deprived environment, that TV can be an absolute plus for them? And do you think it might be worth, well, it's probably already going on, as you say, we have a publicly funded TV broadcasting system. Is there any research going on into, what aspects, what children are learning, and is it applied to public service broadcasting?
One of the things I'm quite annoyed about is that Ofcom, which was set up in 2003, it isn't responsible for children under the age of 3. What? That's when you're watching. That's when most of the watching goes on. I am constantly in the Children's Media Foundation likewise. They don't really address nothing in their yearbook about 0 to 3s. I mean, they are expensive and difficult to research, and there's a lot of issues about doing, if you're going to go into people's homes and, watch what they're doing, you can imagine people don't get that excited about it. It's a real lack, I think. Maybe it's part of, the British hatred of children. Sorry about that. But, you don't really want to, it's so boring looking at 0 to 3-year-olds. Who'd want to do that? I wish we'd grow up and do it better.
Any more questions, please?
Just to start off with disagreeing with the question over there, I don't think that reading a book to a child is the most boring thing in the world, which leads on to my question about what do you feel about the role of parents or whoever is watching or reading with a child in sort of embellishing the experience and drawing things out.
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually say I have a chapter in the book which is about the importance of social viewing. And I quote Gogglebox quite a lot because I find it really funny. But the way that you watch television, that's when I say entering your culture. It's not just TV that's the culture. It's the family TV watching that's the culture. It's the choices that you make. And about the book being boring, I think it's probably okay the first sort of 3 or 4 times, but maybe the 10th time it gets a bit. What again? But if they want it, they should have it.
Any other questions, please?
Okay.
Okay, That was quite an absolutely fascinating talk. Robert, will you come up here and give our distinguished speaker a little thank you for an absolutely fascinating talk? Thank you so much for all your insights and really interesting information that you've given us.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, you can say,
Look,
yes.
is any of you interested in having a chat with me, or telling me about what your children or grandchildren are doing with TV? Pick up one of these. It's got my contact details on it, a bit more about what I'm doing, and we can pick something up. There's a few of them here. I'll put them down by the cakes.
Let's put it at the back as they go out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and you can come and talk to Carrie before we go. Thank you so much. Thank you.